Hello, everyone. So excited to be here. My name is Hande Orman. I'm the co founder of Tech Interview Coaching. And we're really, really stoked as Tech Interview Coaching to have one of our amazing coaches, Arvind Muthukumar, who's an active coach with us and who's going to talk about his background in a little bit. This is going to be a great opportunity for us to discuss the very, very important topic of how to move from an IC, individual contributor for the newbies out there, to a management role. Very, very relevant topic right now, especially within the tech community. And we're very happy as Tech Interview Coaching to have this next webinar of how to move from an IC to a manager in our final round series. A little bit about Tech Interview Coaching for those that may know or may not know. We were formed in 2020. Myself and the other co-founder, Andrea de la Corte, are ex-Amazonians. We were heavily involved in the tech community, and we wanted to sort of find an opportunity to give it forward during a time when the tech community was struggling. So we've started an interview coaching business, which has now evolved into LinkedIn makeovers, resume reviews and rewrites, and also career guidance. Really, really important stuff for when you want to find that next role out there. So, and that's Tech Interview Coaching. Having said that, I wanted to start with a brief attention grabber, which is that 60% of new managers fail within the first 2 years. And this is a really, really high percentage of people that are failing. And you need to keep in mind, these are people that were already vetted to be successful and they were promoted to become a manager. And the reason why this is happening is because oftentimes companies make the mistake of thinking just because they're great individual contributors and engineers, that they will be great at managing as well. Which is a mistake that they need to overcome. And the proper guidance and resources is often not contributed to make sure that they're growing and enabled in their new roles. Now, having said that, I'm going to go into a couple of slides. I promise we're going to give a lot of opportunities for you guys to ask really, really good questions. Having said that, I would love for you to drop in your questions into the chat bar so we'll get to them, and I promise we'll make an effort to get to them. And I'd love to introduce Arvind Muthukumar. He's been with us since 2020, and moving along, he has done a lot of sessions with Tech Interview Coaching. He's done 200 plus coaching sessions very successfully, helped more than 50 people secure new jobs during these really challenging tech times and progress in their career. His specialty areas are in advancement coaching and interview coaching, and that includes behavioral, coding interviews, system design as well. And he's a master salary negotiator. I've seen him at work. His average uptick in salary is around 20 to 25%. I've seen him at work, even really difficult job offers for our coachees at companies like Amazon. So if you're paired up with Arvind, you're in really, really good hands. And having said that, Arvind, I'd love to give the floor to you so you can continue talking about your background and talk about your journey.
Thanks a lot, Hande. Yeah, great to be with you all, and love to talk more about my journey on how I became a manager from being an IC. So, firstly, I am currently an engineering manager at Deliveroo. I lead a couple of squads who focus on like different business problems at Deliveroo, both engineering tech teams. And before this, I had worked at Amazon for about 5.5 years, where I had moved from an IC to a manager. And prior to Amazon, I had been a co-founder of a startup where I built a team of 9 people from scratch with my co-founders, where we built a fintech platform for crowdfunding. I'd love to talk more about the challenges and the journey on starting up and building a team. And prior to that, I started my journey as a software engineer right after uni at Oracle. So that's kind of my timeline of my career over the past 10 years. I think two things that stand out for me is that, being able to connect what motivates me to be able to feel fulfilled at work, and also how that maps to the role I do day to day. And that is much easier said than done. And I'd love to talk more with you all about what really are the key inflection points of like becoming successful at your job, at being a manager, or in general engineering leader. um, yeah, do feel free to drop your questions on the side. We'll be picking them up like as we talk through other aspects about the webinar. Yeah.
Absolutely. Good call out. And I would also love to do a sort of semi-informal poll. Are you considering, those that have joined this LinkedIn Live event, are you considering moving into a management role? Yes, no, or not sure? We would love to see that. But Arvind, I would love to get started with you and talk about some more challenging stuff. So making that transition from, individual contributor, IC, to manager is easier said than done. Of course, you've experienced it all at some really, really heavy lifting companies. Um, what did you find to be the biggest challenges in doing this?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I would start with where I began my transition. Right, like what I really wanted to do was how do I transition, like figure out how do I transition to a leadership role that enables me to influence um, a number of aspects about the business while also leading like a team of people. And uh, One of the key things that really motivated me was like understanding um, uh, what how problem solving really makes me happy. Like it's important to look at what about your job that doesn't change as you transition to a new role, because these are the core things that will make you happy irrespective of the role you do. At the same time, also understanding how management is the right fit for you, and why you want to go in that direction is super important for you to answer because it will look very different for different people. So for me, what really motivated me was I loved solving problems that require like creative solutions, and also I really loved empowering people to grow, and me being able to solve problems through them at breadth. So as an IC, like you like there are multiple paths to grow in your career, and I think one of the key things that being a manager enables you to do is you can scale yourself through other people in terms of how much impact you're delivering for a company, while also enabling and empowering them to grow into the leaders that they want to be. So in essence, like you're not only solving the problems that you want to, but you're also like solving multiple problems at the same time that you can't do otherwise while you're working as an IC. And if that is something that really interests you, I think you definitely should consider transitioning to becoming a manager.
Absolutely. Really, really good. So empowerment seems to be key, and also empathy, I think, in a way, right? Like you're able to put yourself into the shoes of, and you're able to empower people to do what's best for the company rather than looking out for your own interests. Really good advice. What was the biggest mindset shift you had to make when you were moving from an IC to a manager?
Mhm. Uh, I think the biggest mindset shift I would say that I had to make was um, how I look at failure, because the definition of personal failure changes from what it means for the team. Like being able to really look at what you are failing at or what you're learning, and separating that from what is happening with your team and what is happening with the company is super key. Uh, I can give you an example. Uh, One of the key things that was hard for me when I transitioned to a manager is that I thought losing an engineer from my team was a failure on the team. Um, Whereas uh, in the long run, I got to understand that, understanding which of the engineers are better fit for the goals and the vision of the team, and understanding that if someone's vision and goal and growth curve doesn't align with the team, it's okay to find the right opportunity for them, even if they may not be in your team. So in this case, your interpretation about like how a person is working or not working within the team and what's failure for their team really changes over time. So it's that shift from like my idea of like what's failure to work within a team to what it really means for the team and myself is a big change.
Totally, totally makes sense. And I'm actually going to remove the slide deck as well, just so we have more of our faces, the speakers that people tuned in to see. Wonderful. Okay. And we haven't gotten any questions yet from what I can see. So I really want to encourage people to jot down. There's no stupid question, no bad question. Anything goes. We promise we're not going to call out your names. But in the meantime, I'm going to use the opportunity to continue to pick your brain, Arvind, because you have really lots of pearls of wisdom when it comes to this matter. Um, this is something that I often struggle with myself, which is imposter syndrome, right? When you made that transition from an IC to a manager, did you have imposter syndrome? I'm sure you did to a certain degree. We're all human, right? And how did you deal with it?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Hande, because I think you certainly meet and form new relationships with many more people in the company when you transition to management, because you're not only managing your team, but you're also managing upwards about, like, what expectations you're setting with the stakeholders of your team as well. So one aspect is what it takes to do well in your job. Two is how do you set expectations with the people you work with. So in a sense, I think manager role gives you probably the most intense aspect of an imposter syndrome in general compared to other roles, given the number of like people interactions you have. So a key thing that I would advise anyone to do is find great mentors, and I think I would advise people to have mentors who you can like interact with outside of your day to day, and also at the same time find a mentor who you closely work with on a day-to-day basis, so that you can observe them and sort of like learn from them on how they handle situations that relate to you or like that are similar to you day to day. In that sense, I've been very fortunate to have like a great manager who helped me with my transition, who I could learn from on a day-to-day basis while also having mentors outside of my role. And I would seek not just like an engineering manager mentor, but also like seek a mentor who is an engineer, and seek a mentor who is a product manager, because they give you different perspectives that you can draw from,
Right,
and build your own version of like what good management and leadership
right.
looks like. Yeah.
Right, to push you out of your comfort zone and also to understand the perspective of other teams as well. That's really good advice. We have a question from one of the attendees. What was the most challenging moment in your transition, and how did you overcome it? Really, really good question.
Um, yeah, it's a good question. So I would say, um, I think the three key aspects to I'll give a bit of context to that before I go into like what was the challenging moment, because as a manager, I think you're responsible for three key things. One is understanding what business value and what customer value your team creates, and being able to translate that into a roadmap. Two is ensuring you're setting up people in your team for success, and what that means is, are they set up with the right challenges, and does that mean that them solving the challenges will enable your team to deliver on the roadmap and the value. Three is how you navigate conflicts, and how do you ensure that the differences and like the challenges your team face are effectively solved, right? In that essence, one of the hardest challenges I've faced is being able to navigate people in the team and empower them to like see the value of collaboration. Like, I've faced people who are particularly very collaborative and who are particularly not very collaborative as well. So being able to like empower someone who is not seeing the value of collaboration, to be able to like help them not just see the value but also reorient them to contribute to the team, is one of the challenging parts, because it's a lot easier said than done.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. Um, we don't have any questions from no additional questions at this point, and I we do have a bit of a gem, which is resources like books to read that Arvind has found really useful later on. So if you stay in the webinar, we'll make sure to share those as well. Some of those I've read as well, and they were really really insightful in making such a transition. Um, what would you what would you say to someone who's on the fence of, I have this like comfy, cushiony job as an IC. I'm making a good salary. Like, why should I push myself to go into a management role, which is going to be way more responsibilities, headaches, performance reviews, etc.?
Mhm. Uh, I think I would, if you think, if you're considering management role, I would say, no management transition is like a one-way door. You can always decide if that's not for you. So I would encourage them to try one. Two is, trying that will also give you a broader perspective of like what it means to succeed as an IC as well. So you being exposed to a number of aspects of the business will actually enable you to be a better IC. So there's nothing particularly that you would lose if you do want to try the transition as a manager. Again, I would reiterate the point around like trying to map what really motivates you about your job and connecting that to like the role that you want to transition into. And if you think you are at a breaking point or like a ceiling of like how much you can scale yourself as an IC, one of the key roles that you can like pick up is management, where you can scale further.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing, Arvind. We have a repeat question from someone who's watching. Thank you for that. What skills do you wish you had developed earlier in your management career? This is a good sort of life skill question, right? If I was able to go back, what life skills would you have developed?
I think time management is key. I think that's something I had to do multiple times over. Because as a manager, you're looking at multiple dimensions of your team, not just yourself. Because as an IC, you know that you have a set of tasks that you need to deliver and a set of people you need to collaborate with.
Yeah.
With a manager, that sort of like becomes multifold. It's like you're not just responsible for your time, but also the time of like every person in your team, and how that's effectively being utilized as well. So being able to predict what are the riskier aspects about leading a team and planning your time ahead is the key part that I had to learn multiple times over. I wish I had learned that like ahead of time a lot more. Yeah.
Um, when it comes to time management, I have a follow-up question related to this. What sorts of tools are you using on a day-to-day basis, either for your personal to-dos or for your work to-dos to be successful as a manager?
hmm Uh, you mentioned tools, Hande?
Tools, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think I would say the best tool is like keeping it as simple as possible. But what you track is really key in that aspect, right? Like, one, going back to what I mentioned about like translating a roadmap into like valuable outcomes. So knowing what are the key deliverables of your team and ensuring that you're tracking the health of those deliverables. Two is ensuring every person in your team is set up for success and what that means and what are the riskier areas about that. And three, how are you set up for tackling both of these? Right, these are the three key dimensions I would track in terms of my to-dos. And I think it is always like a balancing act between stepping in to set up the right mechanisms for providing you the feedback for what's going well and what needs attention on each of these
Okay.
areas, so you can step in as needed and recalibrate your to-dos accordingly.
Did you mention Trello as well? I forgot. As
I
a
do, in terms of the tools, I do use Todoist. I do use Trello.
okay.
Um,
Good.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan, and as is the other co-founder of Trello. We're always managing our tech interview coaching stuff on Trello, either for personal or work stuff. Amazing to use. You can put things into to do today, to do this week, into the backlog, major projects. Just amazing in terms of free tools out there. Something else that I want to add as tech interview coaching wisdom is that you should always set yourself attainable goals. Otherwise, you tire yourself out and it makes you feel like, for lack of a better word, a failure if you don't set yourself attainable goals on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure you can agree, Arvind, because it's easy to dissect things into smaller things and set yourself also rewards for when you finish those smaller things. Go out for a coffee, go over to chat with someone else at the next desk over, etc. um, we have another question. What was the hardest skill you had to acquire when you became a manager? And did you struggle to develop that skill when you were also like learning the ropes of management?
The hardest skill I had to acquire. Um, I think the hardest skill I had to acquire was finding the right balance between how you deliver direct feedback, at the same time, ensuring that the other person can like palette the feedback in a way that's constructive for them. So it's I would say it is more it's becoming more nuanced in the way you communicate. I think that's the hardest skill. Again, it's hard to acquire that unless you expose yourself to different types of people who you need to work with as well. And over the years, I think that's the hardest skill I had to develop. Yeah.
Good one. Very good one. Another question that we have is, sorry to keep throwing these questions at you, Arvind,
No, no
but
worries.
now that we have you, you're kind of stuck. You're like my captive audience. How did you become a manager? Were you hired as one? This is a good
Mhm,
question. Or did you transition into one? Like, did you
mhm,
level up into one while you were at Amazon? You may have covered this on your
mhm.
timeline deck. If you could just reiterate that. If you did transition, how did you convince your manager?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, so I had joined Amazon after, like, working on my startup for about a couple of years. So I had a, um, you know, um, I had some exposure around, like, building a team from scratch. But that, I know that also translates to very different challenges when you are in a company of different size. So when I did join Amazon, I was a software engineer, but I always knew that, okay, at some point I had to find a role where I can be most effective. And at some point, I also knew I had to scale myself to influence multiple aspects about the business. And I think that, and I saw that personally for me, I'm quite effective in like delivering through other people and empowering other people. So this is a natural conversation that I've had with my manager at Amazon about like 2 years into my role, where I have, like, earned the trust of the team and earned the trust of the manager, where I brought it up saying that, hey, I want to be part of, like, conversations around not just the technical problems but also the business problems in the company. And we explored, like, a few options around, like, what's the best for me to try. One was becoming a product manager, one was becoming a program manager, and one was becoming an engineering manager. Of the three, for me, I think what really clicked was empowering people. And I think of the three roles, it is quite evident for me that, okay, I need to try this transition out for me to see what works well for me. And that's how I ended up, like, starting my transition. And I also would like to highlight that, um, it is also important for you to understand if there's a business requirement for your organization to have a new manager as well, because in most cases, businesses create that opportunity as the business is expanding. So it's important to have that clarity with your manager on, like, whether there's future for you to transition into the role, and also, like, be within the company or the organization, in the medium to long term as well, because that's what will drive a lot of these transitions to be successful, because there is a business need for the company as well.
Totally. So, did you have to write? Amazon is notorious for transitioning, leveling up, I should say, from one level to the other. I think on average, most people are at a level 5 or so.
Mhm.
If you're working in the offices, did you have to ever write a leveling up document? I forget what they were called. Remind me. I'm an ex-Amazonian myself, but it was a while ago.
Yeah, I think it's a transition document. So
The
ideally,
transition document,
yeah.
exactly.
So ideally, the transitions last about like 6 to 8 months, and
Yeah.
sometimes they can last up to a year. And I think at a company like Amazon, or, like, any large company or a medium-sized company, you have, like, clear levels and expectations laid out. So what you need to do is, even before you transition, you can have a look at the levels and expectations and see, like, from where you are in your current level, what does that scope and influence map to, and what does success mean in the next level, or what does it mean to meet expectations in the next level, and sort of, like, work backwards from there to write up, like, what you need to exhibit in your like deliverables, to showcase that you can do the role. And it'll be an ongoing live document where you gather your, like, body of
Like
work.
any Amazon document, an ongoing live document.
Exactly.
True. And employees are often expected to write those themselves, which is always an interesting process. But when it does go through, oh, it's so satisfying, isn't it, Arvind? Okay, well, we have another question. Thank you for that, Arvind. How do you establish credibility as a new manager, especially if you're leading former peers? Yeah, this is really tricky.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I think my transition at Amazon, like, was exactly that. Like, I ended up becoming manager of the team that I was working in as an engineer. So I would say it is a tricky part of your transition, because I think you have established credibility in terms of the work you do with your colleagues already. So you have that, like, credibility with your team that, you can do the role of a software engineer. So they value that. So the key is knowing where you can start building a trust with your team, and then showcasing evidence of, like, you being able to, like, help them in terms of the team's processes, which you are already doing as a engineer to some extent, because you are always, like, enabled to change a process in the team that does not work for you or the team. So I would say, look at what dimensions of a manager role that will enable you to be successful in the role, and then map that back to what your team trusts you on already, and then start building towards what other evidence you need to gather and where you need to help the team most. And if anything, you would know the pain points of your team better as an engineer transitioning to a manager rather than someone coming in new. So I would start building
Totally,
on that. Yeah.
totally, totally. And I think there's no shame in just being kind of humble about the process. You shouldn't be ashamed of the transition and into becoming a new manager, but at the same time, you can take them out for coffee, right? Like, let me know if you disagree, and just be like, hey, like, I'm really excited about this new role. Like, are there some things that, even though I've been working within the same team, that you'd especially like for the new manager to focus on, and just kind of pick their brain as well. I think everyone appreciates being heard, right? So yeah, really, really good advice. All right. Well, I think I don't have any more questions from people. We've tackled so many questions, one after the other. Do you need a water break, Arvind? Should we like water you or hose you
I'm good.
down?
I'm good. Thank you.
You're so good. By the way, we're both based out of London. Arvind and I don't live really close to each other, but central Londonish. I don't know if yours would be considered central London as well. Um, and the weather has been super cold here. I don't know where people are joining in from. Since it's LinkedIn, it could be anywhere that's on Earth, right? Let me see if I had one more question that I wanted to ask you. Is there anything that you want to add that we haven't tackled that you would consider to be like,
Hmm.
we're going to get to the books later, but you were discussing mentors, guidance,
Hmm.
humility, empowering people.
Yeah.
Anything that you think is like a good tidbit or wisdom for people to have?
Yeah, I think that the two things I would mention that we haven't covered before. One is, I think, what you mentioned near the end of the conversation as well, Hande. It's having like regular one-to-ones and ensuring that you are, like, having feedback both ways. And I think you need to be really understanding like the pulse of the team at any moment in time to make the right call for the team. And two is being able to manage upwards, right? And being able to do one and two at the same time well is what will like dictate a lot of your success as a manager. And often enough, like a lot of managers fall into this trap where they think that they need to protect their team like entirely. Like, I think a key to being a good manager is also, like, providing the space and like opportunities for your team to fail in small ways. um, Rather than like you taking over all the weight of like the responsibility of the team. So really, like, ensuring that you delegate the responsibility of success to your team and be more of an enabler and an empowerer rather than, like, you trying to do everything. I think that understanding what that looks like for you is going to be quite important.
We have a couple of additional questions, Arvind.
Mhm.
Again, take a water break whenever you need. I feel bad.
No, no worries.
um, what are the most common mistakes new managers make during the transition? You may have already tackled this, but if
Yeah.
you want to touch on it again, really, really important question.
Mhm. Definitely. Uh, I think a common mistake a lot of people make when they transition is not delegating enough. I think people really struggle, sort of like, handing over the reins of like how things are being executed to other people, because that's something you're so used to as an IC. So being okay with taking your hands off of like the execution details to some extent, like you don't have to like completely wash your hands away, but being able to delegate effectively, and so that you are truly scaling yourself to focus on the other aspects about like your team, is like a key thing to learn. And quite a few people like struggle with this, and as a consequence, they don't find enough time for other aspects about the managerial role to be successful.
Uh, what are some signs you're falling back into an IC mindset, and how can you correct them? Really good one.
That's a very good question. um, I think the key thing is how you divide your time. So if your time is spent considerably on the execution of like the projects alone, then you need to take a step back and ask yourself as to like, why are you spending X amount of time on a particular thing? Is that time something that will truly need your role as a manager, or is that something that can be delegated to an IC, right? Like you can keep asking a question of like, what should I do to eliminate myself from what I'm doing so that I can be more present for the team and empower the people to succeed, and also like oversee the right amount of like technical like designs that need my attention as a manager at a higher level.
It is sort of tricky though, right? Like I can speak from personal experience. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and sometimes I tend to go down a rabbit hole, um, which is sort of an added layer. But if you subjectively or objectively know there's a better way of doing this, or if only I could execute it, it would take me way less time rather than having to explain it to a peer, or
Mhm.
someone who's reporting into you. Like, how do you stop yourself from doing that? Like, do you invest the time and have a sit down just to teach them once and for all, and just be like, hey, my door is always open.
Mhm.
You can always come and ask me to replicate it. How do you handle that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it comes down to you planning the roadmap in such a way that there is enough time for your team to learn like the ropes of the work as well, right? Like you don't want to set your team up for failure by setting up like very high ambitious goals that the team can't deliver. One, you set up enough time for your team to learn the ropes as well, and whenever you have to like explain something, you don't provide them the solutions directly. You ask the right questions that point them in the right direction, and they go and figure it out, right? Like you're there more as an enabler. And if you have to provide the solution, you're not really giving them the opportunity to learn. And the longer you do that, the longer you will be needed in the equation. So it's really not about, I think, understanding that it's really not about like you providing the solution, but rather you enabling them to figure out ways in which they can find the answers themselves, so that they don't need you.
Right.
And I would continue to go back to like reiterate that point. Like you need to look at how you can eliminate yourself from like your team needing you essentially.
Right, right. So it's sort of a long-term investment. You need to look at it from a long-term perspective rather than
Yeah,
short-term.
yeah.
Really good. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you an AI related question nowadays, which seems to be on top of everyone's mind. How do you feel about, let's dumb it down, ChatGPT? There are a ton of tools out there right now, but just ChatGPT for your ongoing daily tasks. How much do you use it? How much do
Mhm.
you rely on it? What's your recommendation on it as a manager?
Yeah. I would say those tools are quite powerful if you already know what you want to do, right? They are a great accelerator to what you want to do. Like, say, I want to write like a proposal. It can generate the proposal, but it can't address all the nuances of like what you want to deliver, right? So I would say, if anything, these tools are going to provide a lot more productivity acceleration, but they will not be replacing what you have to do. You still are pretty much the director of like your role. That's how I see it.
Totally, totally. We within the technical interview coaching realm, um, we are seeing some sort of AI auto-generated tools, etc., out there that assist you in real time. There is one thing to transcribe, obviously, your conversation, but then there's a whole other to seek the input from or the output of a tool to provide real-time answers, and that can be really challenging. It's again a very short-term way of viewing how you want to approach this new position, right? And it's the same thing for your day-to-day job as well, I'm assuming, Arvind. Um, I think that's it in terms of questions. Like, I could sit here for hours and keep asking you questions. It's such a big topic, Arvind, and thank you so much for answering all of these patiently. I want to give you an opportunity, actually, if you could share your books that have assisted you in making that transition. We'll
Mhm.
go back into the slide deck. Um, Open up the fancy new slides that we created. If you could walk us through these books and why they were relevant to you.
Yeah, sounds good. I can do that. Like, I think I would highly recommend, all of these books that I've read myself. I think I'll start with the manager's path. I think it speaks a lot about like what are the different types of engineers you'd face at work as well. Because there are, like, to give an example, there are types of engineers where uh, like, say type one as like people who really want to grow in the role. They're quite interested in like high impact projects. And two, there are engineers who quite enjoy the work they do at the level that they would do, and it's completely fine to do that. So knowing, being able to spot like what kind of engineers are in your team and being able to make the right call with respect to how you map the opportunities to them is what will make you successful as a manager as well. And it will all this book also speaks a lot about how do you navigate like your own growth and change as you navigate your scope and impact as well. From here I would jump on to like the third book on Start With Why. Again, I think Start With Why is a great book on leadership itself. So it provides a really good yardstick for you to understand how you want to lead, and how do you create purpose for your team and rethink the purpose multiple times as the business evolves as well. um, and speaking about like the making of a manager and like Atomic Habits, they provide tangible frameworks for you to sort of like measure how you're doing at your goals, and how you can recalibrate what makes you successful in the role as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, Simon Sinek is a personal favorite of mine. He's been blowing up lately. Um, Arvind, thank you so much for this. If there's anything else you want to add, I want to give you sort of the last opportunity to do so.
Mhm.
And unless there are any other questions from the audience, we'll conclude the webinar. Relatively short and sweet, relative to the last one we had. It was slightly over an hour. And we'll continue to do webinars about various topics. Arvind may or may not be part of them. We'll try to include other coaches as well. To reiterate, Tech Interview Coaching provides a lot of the guidance, and throughout some of these issues that we've discussed that I've asked Arvind about, you can directly book sessions, either one-off sessions or subscribe to a subscription plan, by going into our website and seek us out. Start following us on LinkedIn. You can request to work with Arvind. You can request to work with me as a behavioral coach. I'm also an ex-Amazonian, have an MBA, and we have a really good group of seasoned coaches that are representing all kinds of different backgrounds. So we're blessed with that, and we're blessed to have Arvind as well. And yeah, unless there are any tiny last minute questions, I think we're going to conclude. Follow us on LinkedIn, reach out to us with any sort of even one-off questions. We're happy to provide you with guidance free of charge. And we can assist you with sort of your online footprint as well when it comes to your LinkedIn profile and your resume as well. And having said that, that concludes the how to transition from an individual contributor to a manager webinar, as hosted by Tech Interview Coaching, in the final round webinar series that we've been doing. Thank you for everyone's time. Thank you for your time, Arvind, and
Thank you.
continue to stay in touch, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Thanks. Bye bye.
Thanks.